So, welcome to the AIQUALISER Podcast, where we try and balance out the AI noise with conversations about how people are really using it. And for me, the first self-improvement books that I bought were the For Dummies books. They kind of came out in 1991 when I left school and started my entrepreneurial career for real. So I'm really excited to be talking today to somebody who literally wrote the book on digital marketing, Russ Henneberry, who was the co-author of Digital Marketing for Dummies. So welcome, Russ.
Hey, great to be here, John.
So, as I say, for me, that's really exciting, the For Dummies book. But I know that you've done a lot of other stuff, and one of the things that you talk about is reinvention. You've seen a lot of things come and go, and you've had to reinvent a number of times to if you like take advantage of those or be in the place of those. So maybe just give us some background.
Well, I started out as an educator, so my college degree is actually in secondary education, social studies, history. Taught school for 4 years, actually, in my first career, and then jumped out of that and started a company right when the internet was becoming a real thing. Like I'd say 2003, 2004, when the internet was, and I built my first website and did all this stuff. And uh, I started a company doing fundraising for schools because I knew schools. So, um, I built my first website. I started to figure out a little bit about SEO, like why, there were search engines at that time. And, uh, you know, we were just all trying to kind of figure it out. We were writing blog posts and, I was following OG digital marketers like Brian Clark, a copy blogger, and Chris Brogan and Darren Rouse, and some of these early folks that some of you don't even know who these folks are, but they were sort of the early digital marketers. We called them internet marketers back then, John. And I fell in love with digital marketing. That first business was a massive failure. I could never get it going, but I found my passion, and that was digital marketing. And I took that experience and, at various times I've worked for companies. I worked for, in the corporate world for Network Solutions, which was the first company that was allowed to register domain names here in the United States. I worked in their SEO department managing, I don't know, we had 4,000 clients at any one time. We had dozens and dozens of people working on search engine optimization. And then we had a PPC department that bought ads and web design department, and kind of got the idea of what it looks like to try to scale digital marketing up to where you're managing thousands of accounts and stuff like that. Spoiler alert, that's really hard to do, to manage that client load. And then went to work for salesforce.com, did content marketing for them, helped them launch blog.salesforce.com, and a ton of experience there. From there, John, there was when I learned about how to justify content and digital marketing in terms of its ROI. Salesforce really cares about ROI. Like, where are the sales coming from? Why are we paying you guys to write articles on a blog? So sort of a master's degree in business metrics from Salesforce. My last real job, in between these times, I would always go out and pick up clients and do all these things. My last real gig, I would say, was in 2013 to 2017. I worked for digitalmarketer.com. Ryan Dice and his company. And we grew that company. I was really proud of that. I was in charge of content marketing and product there because we built a lot of courses. And, so my experience as a teacher actually has served me really well in my career. But I would consider myself, a generalist in the area of digital marketing. I was interested in everything: ads, content, copywriting, analytics, and data. But if I really zeroed in, it would be on content marketing. That's where I was in the digital marketing world. That's where my sort of mile deep goes, right? On content and SEO and search and social and that kind of stuff. And when AI came around, I was like, whoa, this thing can write, this thing can create. And of course now, so that was November 2022. Basically immediately recognized like, wow, this is a game-changing technology. Like, this is crazy. And so I was like, I really need to learn this. You talk about reinvention. I think it's it's one of these things that takes courage, I think, to or maybe naivete, that you could just go and learn something and pivot like that. But I don't know. I've always been the sort of person that gets curious about something and maybe even unintentionally starts to reinvent, because I just love these tools. I mean, I know there's downsides to them that we need, we can talk about, you know, socially, morally, ethically, all of that stuff is certainly there. But from a business perspective, I really get these tools. I don't know why, but from a interaction with computer standpoint, I just really sort of fell into it and was like, wow, like I just kind of understand how these tools work. So I launched the Click in 2019, actually, as a newsletter about digital marketing, and have slowly morphed that into, it's very AI forward, and it's sort of a combination of digital marketing and AI.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like you got into AI right from the start, because it's a question I like to ask every year. When did you realize that AI was going to be something useful? But from what you're saying, as it came out, you were kind of on. You were like, wow, this is something I need to take notice of.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to. I'd love to go back in my LinkedIn, because early in 2023, so pretty, a few months after ChatGPT had their moment, and then now Google was on the scene with at the time it was Bard, I think, was that what it was called, the earliest version of Google's AI answer to ChatGPT. And I started to think about, like, wait a minute, and I ran a poll on LinkedIn that said, how how often do you ask an AI a question that you used to ask Google or a search engine? And at that time, early 2023, almost nobody. So there was four answers to that, which was rarely, sometimes, so sort of like graduated up. And almost everybody was in the never, I've never done that, or rarely stage of that. And I just knew. And so I started running this poll every 3 months. I would put the same poll out, same question. And slowly you started to see people starting to answer that, okay, I do it rarely now, or I do it often, or I do it almost always. And so I saw, I guess, not AI as a creation engine as much as I saw how it's going to impact the consumer, and how people are going to find information, how people are going to interact with computers. That change is already now well underway. We all know that. But I don't know. I saw it pretty early, and I wrote an article that was basically comparing, like, the experience between Googling something and sort of hunting around through a bunch of links and seeing a bunch of ads and, pop-ups and, can't find this, can't find that. And then the experience of just asking an AI the same question and just getting a response back, right? And being able to follow up that response. And it was just so starkly clear that this is where this is going to go. And so more interesting to me has been than the ability for AI to ever create anything, even though that's fascinating as well, is the disruption in how, people are interacting with machines, and, just doing what we always do, solving problems, being entertained, being inspired, educating ourselves, making informed buying decisions. So, people are using AI for all those purposes.
So, what are the things that AI does that still surprise you?
Every day. Yeah, every day. I mean, like you know, anybody that thinks they can predict what this is going to look like, I think even 3 years from now, I mean, I think it's doable to sort of project out a year, and say, okay, I can see sort of where these are going. If you use the tools a lot and you're paying attention to labs and what they're talking about and that kind of thing, you can kind of see where this is going to be in a year. In 3 years, I just don't know that we can see, and certainly not in 5 years. Like it's just so fuzzy as to what it will look like in 3 to 5, certainly 10 years. It's just like all bets are off. Like you have no idea what anything's going to look like in 10 years. But in the next year, you can kind of see, well, everything's going to get a little smarter. A lot of the buggy things about this are going to go away. And, this is going to, and then, but then occasionally, you just see something and you're just like, oh, I didn't see that one coming. I didn't anticipate that. And there's usually small examples of things that it's just like, wow, okay, that's new. So for example, when ChatGPT 5 came out, I had been anticipating that for a long time and thought this is going to be a big change. Like they're going to probably blow up the whole interface, maybe. And ChatGPT 5 will be a leap like 3.5 was to 4. It wasn't. Like from an intelligence standpoint, from a capability standpoint, the AI didn't get that much better when ChatGPT 5 came out. And it was sort of I don't know if you remember this, but it was sort of a letdown when it was like, oh, that's 5? Like that's ChatGPT 5. And then 5.1 came out and it was sort of more of the same. And I don't really remember 100% like how to characterize 5.1, but 5.2, which is out now, at the time we're recording this, is what ChatGPT 5 should have probably been. They may have rushed to get that out. Because 5.2 can, the other day I was working on something and I gave it quite an ambitious task and it worked for 8.5 minutes. Like I just sat there and watched it working because you can kind of open this little caret tab in there now and watch its behavior, and it sort of gives you some insight as to what it's thinking about as it goes. It's become way more agentic. I've never seen ChatGPT like work for that long, right, on something. That's one of the curious things is like everybody talks about speed when it comes to AI, but what's at least equally as interesting is AI that works for long time horizons, and that's what we're starting to see with these tools is this thing can work for, Claude Opus. And when I use AI to code, for example, I have no idea how to code, John, like no clue, man. Like I'm not a coder. I'm not a developer, but I can build little applications and stuff like that, as you've probably played with as well. And you'll watch, an AI go and work for 20 minutes on something and you go eat lunch or something and go for a walk and come back and it's finishing up. So AIs with long time horizons and what they're capable of doing with the right set of instruction and their ability to sort of like go through something and then make a decision about, based on the prior. So you tell it to do something, it goes and does something. And then based on what it does in this first step, that informs the next step. That is agentic behavior. And we're already seeing it just in regular old $20 a month ChatGPT 5.2 is able to sort of make decisions on the fly based on what, where it wants to go. And that's surprising to me, that we're already at this point.
What if somebody's just starting out and they've not used AI yet and, they're new to this? What would you suggest that like they do first to try and you have that, they've got the curiosity, but where should they direct it and how should they sort of take the first steps?
Well, if you're using ChatGPT for work, which it wasn't necessarily built for you to do work inside of it. It wasn't necessarily built for you to do science or math or, research recipes for dinner, or it wasn't it's not, it's a general purpose technology, sort of like electricity, right? Where, electricity wasn't necessarily built to do this or that, but now it's just sort of here, and the applications of it are everywhere, and we kind of don't even notice that it's here. Uh, but if you're trying to use it for a very specific purpose, which is to do work, right? And, maybe grow a business or grow somebody else's business that you work for or work on, um, we need to think about it in terms of and I hate to anthropomorphize AI because I don't. There's nothing about it when you really dive deep into it that is necessarily human, but it does behave very similar to a human intelligence. And so if we walk through this sort of idea of, you think about if you brought on a new hire at your company, and you brought this new person in, this person might be very smart, very capable person. But on day one, when you first bring them into the office or whatever, they don't know anything. Like they may not even know what you sell. They may not know who you serve. They don't know all the past projects you've been working on. They don't have any of that context. And so that's why the new guy at the job is sort of the new guy. It's like, oh, okay, the new guy, and he's sitting in the meeting, and, he's just trying to sort of soak up what's going on in the office, what's going on with this company, who do we serve? What do we sell? What are we doing? And your AI is very similar to that. In fact, it's tremendously capable, right? Has insane levels of knowledge. And now, as things have evolved, it's got all of these capabilities to create things and organize things, and summarize things for you, and do so much work for you, help you think through things, right? It can be a very good thought partner. But the problem is when you go to use an AI and you don't structure it properly, like you don't sort of put some kind of structure in place, then it's a new guy, right? It's just every time you start using it, it's the new guy. It's like, I don't know, like, what the heck are you working on? Like, who are you? Like, because again, because it's a general purpose technology, it has no idea what you're going to talk to it about. Like, you go and you start to type in there, you could type anything in there. You could ask it, to build you a workout routine. You could ask it to talk to you about, what's coming up with the NFL playoffs this weekend or whatever, right? Like, it doesn't have any idea. And so what we have to do is structure the AI in a way that, if you want to, again, anthropomorphize it and turn it into a person, like, you want to train it, right? You want to sort of give it an idea of, this is what we do around here. This is who we serve. And you want to store that inside of the AI in a persistent manner so that it's always there. Just like, after the new guy's been there for 6 months and he comes back into work, he's got all this stored knowledge, right? He knows like all the projects we've been working on. He knows who we serve. Like, he's got a much better idea and is much more valuable to the company after 6 months, hopefully, and has learned the ropes a little bit. And after a year and after 2 years, like, this person becomes, I used to tell my son all the time, because he worked in the restaurant industry, and so did I when I was going through college and stuff. I said, never stay at a restaurant. I said, at some point you will become the guy who knows everything. Like, where everything is, how every process works in the restaurant, but you're not getting paid any more than anybody else. It's simply because you've been there for 3 years or 4 years. And it's like, I don't know, ask Russ, he's been here forever. And the same thing happens with your AI, is start to think about it like, it is deceptively simple to use, isn't it, John? Like, when you go to chatgpt.com, literally on the page right now, it says, what are you working on? Ask me anything. Okay. So it looks like, well, there we go. And if I start to type in there, it's going to answer me. It's going to start doing things. But when it's not structured properly for work, what you get back is often just like generic, bland, boiled chicken. And it's no wonder why you get that back, because it's a new guy. It doesn't know what you do. It doesn't know what you sell. It doesn't know what projects you're working on. So my advice to people that are getting started is, and most people that are quote unquote getting started have probably played with these tools and maybe have come away a little unimpressed or frustrated at times. The AI does all kinds of wacky stuff. It hallucinates, it forgets things, it goes off the rails, it turns back completely rational responses that are kind of useless because it's like, well, that's just the most generic answer I could have ever got. So if you're really going to use it for work, I think you need to invest in thinking about and putting in a little bit of time, energy, money, whatever it takes to learn how to actually use the tools, right? Like, and that means structuring the AI in a way that it's not a new guy anymore. Does that make sense? Did that analogy work?
I love it. I love it because when you start to use it, it's amazing, the stuff that you get out of it. And I think maybe that's the gap. Maybe because it seems so intelligent, maybe we're just not realizing it is the new guy. And I totally love your new guy, analogy, because if we bear that in mind, when we start to use it, we go, okay, well, this may be really capable, but it's day one. They don't understand, or it doesn't understand, or the machine doesn't understand, anything about me, anything about my business or the project I'm working on. So I love it. I totally love the new guy. I think that's...
Yeah, and I think the thing to point out here is that you don't have to wait 6, 12, 3 years for it to become not the new guy. You just need to structure it. It would be the difference. I bet you everybody listening to this or whatever, you've had jobs where you came in to the job and they had a good onboarding process. So they maybe put you through a good training. And my guess is that you became extremely valuable much quicker, right? Because they had a good onboarding process. Like they brought you through and they were like, okay, like here's what we sell. Here's what your job is. Here's what you're going to do. And other companies you go to work for, they're just like, well, there's your desk. Like, figure it out. Like, this is your new job, right? And so much longer to ever catch up and get up to speed and become valuable to the company. And the same thing is true here. Your AI can become your most valuable business consultant and worker on day one if it's structured right. You can just start it that way. In fact, like when people join the Click and they start to go through my training, a lot of times I tell them, completely purge your ChatGPT account, which is, like some people are like, purge it? And I'm like, yeah, if you want it, I'm not telling you what to do, but one of the nice things you could do is just start over and structure it this way and watch how much better it gets. So at 2 different times, I've completely erased my ChatGPT account and started it from the beginning to restructure it. And ultimately ended up with this growth OS process that we teach at the Click, which is how to structure ChatGPT in a way that it can do work so that it's not the new guy on day one. It's a 5-year veteran on day one.
If we can make AI go from new guy to, the most valuable team member in the day or in a very short time, people have a lot of worry, don't they, about AI replacing them. So what would you say to people that have that fear?
I wrote about this the other day. So there's this concept in AI called Jevons paradox. So allow me to, some of you probably heard of it, some of you maybe haven't. So Jevons paradox is this idea that any time in the past that we've had a technological breakthrough, it's not reduced the amount of available work, it's increased it, like exponentially. So for example, let's go back to that electricity example. You create electricity, a completely game-changing technology, hard to kind of put to kind of put our heads into a place where there was no electricity, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, what is this, right? Like, and it didn't eliminate job. I mean, it did eliminate complete, total departments of jobs. Like there's entire things that just phased out. It's like, well, we don't need this many candle makers anymore, for example. But in the end, it created this entire productivity boom around it that created tremendous amounts of jobs and productivity and things to do using this new technology. Same with computing, right? So computing, people are like, well, are we going to need accountants anymore? Are we going to need, any of these people are computing? And all that did was lead to a productivity boom. So you look at how sort of the world world GDP, it just always goes up in this upward trend, no matter. And you can see these sort of like spikes that happen because of major technological breakthroughs. So the AI optimist will say, Jevons paradox, like it always comes out this way, that any technological breakthrough will not lead to less work, it leads to more work. So the critics of that will say, well, yeah, but we're not talking about electricity. We're talking about coworkers. We're talking about technology that does what we do. Like we didn't, electricity wasn't that way. Computing wasn't that way. Like we didn't do those things. This thinks, this rationalizes, this can mimic things like empathy and emotion. It doesn't have emotion, doesn't have empathy, but it mimics it. So it could conceivably be a therapist or a doctor, and bring not just the knowledge of medicine or psychology or whatever, but also the bedside manner, maybe even in a better way than a doctor would, because the AI just never has a bad day. It's always, if you want it to be, it can always be positive and chipper and polite and all of those things. So I don't know what to tell you on this one, John. Like I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I think again we can kind of foresee what's going to be happening over the next year, and I can give you a prediction there. But in terms of 3, 5, 10 years out, I don't know what this looks like, because when this stuff first launched, there was a lot of people that were like, "Well, I don't use AI. Like I'm a purist. Like I'm not using it." Sort of like it was some kind of performance enhancing drug that you don't want to get caught with in the Tour de France. You know what I mean? Like so, like instead, what we're seeing now is people are saying, I do use it. I do understand it. I am learning it. And I think that's what, I mean, there's just no question. Every survey of a CMO or, founders are like, there is a gap out there of, there's people that know how to use these tools and there's people that absolutely don't. And we need more people that do understand these tools. My advice for people clearly is learn this technology and don't just learn it at the surface level. Like get training, like actually learn how to use the tools, because, um, imagine a accountant that says they won't use spreadsheets or Excel or something. Like it's just, it just doesn't make any sense that we wouldn't use these tools. So, you know, um, my advice to people is to invest in learning these tools, and not just at the surface level, but learn them deeply and understand how they apply to business and actually executing work.
I think right at the start you mentioned curiosity. So being curious and thinking about how they work and trying to understand them. But as you say, not I think that I always say that I think there's 3 approaches to AI. There's the one you just talked about, the head in the sand. I'm going to put my head in the sand, and I'm hoping when I put it back out, this thing's gone away, which I think we're seeing now. It's not going away. It's here to stay. There's the use it on the surface or mindlessly accept, what it gives you. Or there's, as you say, this kind of get under the hood. What is it good at? What is it? What actually is it? How does it work? And how can I bring my skills to bear? So how would you kind of work on that? How would you suggest people try and understand, what it is and what it can do and what they can bring on top of that?
Well, I mean, when I first got started in learning AI, there was not a lot of people publishing about it. Like a lot of people, the initial reaction in early 2023 was just one of panic a little bit. But most of the content that we were seeing was around the morality of it, the ethics of it. But I was starting to think like, where's the information about like actually how to use these tools? So I was fortunate in 2003, 2004, when I was coming out of that first business venture that I mentioned at the beginning. Google was becoming the household name. So when, I started hearing my mom say the word Google, in the early 2000s. And so I was like fortunate to be standing right there in the very early part of the very beginning of my digital marketing career, when Google was becoming this mega platform, what I would call the first mega digital platform, where, it started out, it was a search engine or whatever, but like, I mean, think about what Google is today. It's a massive platform that's difficult to pin down exactly what it does, when you look at all of its assets. And I remember thinking, like, I'm going to learn this tool. Like, I am going to learn Google. Like, I don't want to know a little bit about Google. I want to know everything there is to know about Google. And at that time, I didn't tell this part of the story at the front, but when my business was sort of floundering around, I had made a partnership with a guy who sold trade books to schools. And he just said, well, you're doing all this stuff like for your company, but it does, he's like, how's it going? And I was like, not so good. I just had a kid. Like, I'm kind of freaking out. I'd be health insurance. He's like, come work for me. And I said, well, I'll come work for you if you put me through MBA school. So we made that agreement. And, it was there that he came to me and he said, why are we not showing up in Google? Like, why is our competitor showing up in Google and not us? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, I want you to go find out. I want you to figure that out. I want you to get everywhere down in there and figure out why that's happening. And I realized right then that there was so much value. Like, this guy who owned this company, maybe we were doing like, I don't know, 50 million or something in trade books to schools. So it was like a decent sized company. And he was really interested in why this little platform was not showing up his thing. And the more I got into it, the more I was like, holy cow, like there's a whole world underneath here. Because Google is exactly at that time and still today was exactly as ChatGPT was. You would go to Google and there'd just be this white screen and a box, and it'd just be like, ask me anything. Just like ChatGPT is today. And 99.999% of people just use Google. Like, they would just use it. They would just go in and type in whatever they wanted. I want to eat some Thai food, or I want to learn about whatever, like you type it into Google and you just move on with your life, and it just works. Then there was a small percentage of us that learned under the hood. How does this thing work? Like, I want to know deeply, why does it work this way? Why does it work that way? And you sort of create this industry around search, right? And how Google works, basically. And the funny thing is, I left that company, and that's when I went to work for Network Solutions in the SEO world. And 2.5, 3 years later, I saw my old boss, who owned that book company in New York City, at the Javits Center, big convention center. On the one side of the Javits Center, they had the Book Expo, and he was speaking there. I walked past, he's in the Starbucks line, and I said, hey, deal. He's like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm here to talk about Google on stage at this other digital marketing conference over here. So in 2.5 years, I became one of the people that knew Google, like really understood the business impact of Google. How does it work? How do you make this do that? And how do you make that do that? And so the same thing's happening now with AI, right? And actually, there's multiple platforms in between there. There was 2007. I watched so many people not just understand Amazon, but really learn Amazon, like really get in there, because Amazon became this thing. It was just like everybody. And it was just massive value in Google in early 2000s, then Amazon, then Facebook. My friend Molly Pittman, who I've been working with for 13, 14 years, she was standing there in her early 20s, and here comes Facebook advertising. And Everybody, it was like taking candy from a baby on Facebook. It was so cheap to buy leads and buy sales. She didn't just use Facebook and just be like, well, I learned how to post on it and I learned how to do that. But yeah, just like everybody else. She learned Facebook. She learned the ad platform. She got underneath the hood. She figured out how does it work, what works on here, what doesn't, and found her, she's still doing that. Like it's 2026. She's still doing that. We are at the fourth platform. Google, Amazon, Facebook, ChatGPT, or AI, let's just call it. Who knows who's going to win and who's going to end up being the MySpace of AI, but we have AI here. I would say, most people are using ChatGPT. Learn it. Really learn it. Don't just learn surface level, like how to write prompts and stuff like that. Learn deeply how it works because there's so much value in it. Every business owner out there is trying to figure out, how can I use this? Just like my old boss, Neil, when he came to my desk and he said, why are we not showing up in Google? They are asking the same questions about AI, and you're standing right here at the forefront of that, right? You're in the beginning of it. This isn't something that is, you could decide to learn it at the surface level, or you can decide to go a mile deep on this and really learn these tools. And there's so much more, just like there was with Google, Facebook, Amazon. There's so much more under the hood that you could learn. And it does come back to curiosity, John. That's one of the things I appreciate about you too. You're in my community and you're one of the most curious people in there, like always toying around with this and playing with that and finding new cool use cases to use it for work. And that's valuable.
Yeah, I think it's a great takeaway, isn't it? So, if you're scared of it, and you're worried that it might take your job, then face it head on and learn everything about it. Jump into it and get under the hood.
I remember doing that originally and finding it far less scary after I got under the hood. I was like, oh, there's a little bit of a wizard behind the curtain going on here. If that effect where it's like, there's no spooky sentient being under here. It's brilliant engineering that makes AI work.
That's an interesting take, isn't it? Because you're taking away the fear there by understanding what it is. I like that. I really want to talk to you about the community because for me that's another thing. So I'd love to talk about the click a little bit, but before we do, just that idea of community, because again, I think if you're worried about it, talking to people and getting people's read or people's feedback and learning from other people is probably a great place to start. So one of the things I love about what you've done is, yes, you teach through the courses, but you've really fostered that sense of community of people that bring things to it and chat. So maybe just tell us a little bit about the click.
Yeah. So my take is that everything that's ever happened to me career-wise that was an exponential jump came from being connected to other people rather than. So I believe you need to be doing three things to keep advancing your career. The first one is gaining skills. The second one is gaining experience. And so you combine those two, right? You learn new things and then you go play. So for example, with AI, if you came into the click and you started to do some of my trainings and so forth, it's great because you're looking at that and you're gaining new skills and new knowledge, but then you want to take that and actually do something with it, right? Get experience. I always call this like creating a sandbox. Like even if you don't have your own company or anything just yet, still go and play with the tools, like do the exercises that we do. And that gets you that skills and experience. And skills and experience for me have always been incremental gains in my career, like it's slowly ticking up as I either stay abreast of what's going on with learning new skills or just keeping my skills sharp or getting more experience. All of that sort of like this upward trend in terms of like my earning power, like the amount of money I'm able to earn. But it's always been that third layer. So you have skills, you have experience. The third layer is connections. And it's the people that you know and that you connect with that'll always end up being the exponential gain in your career. Like every major jump that I can remember, including being able to write digital marketing for dummies, and every other big jump type thing for me that unlocked new doors and so forth, came because I knew somebody else. Like me and somebody else partnered up on something, or this person told this person about that. And then, and so being a part of communities is really crucial, and building community around what you're doing, like getting to know other people, is, this is the type of stuff that leads to not only exponential gains, which is awesome about it, right? Like you make these big jumps, but it also just makes work so much more fun, right? When you're a part of something. A lot of us work, I know I do, at home, and maybe don't see anybody but our cat all day. I don't actually have a cat, I have a dog, but you get what I'm saying. Like, so we, at the Click, we create these online meetings where we jump on and, we share ideas. Yesterday, we were on there talking about Notebook LM from Google and some different cool stuff that Michael Longfellow's doing with Notebook LM. And, what I love about that is that, I can't personally possibly keep up with everything that's going on. And so a lot of the members are coming in with cool stuff. Like you came in and did a whole training on how you wrote your book and the things you learned that you would do again, and things how you might do it differently. That kind of stuff's priceless. But on top of it, it's just, been good getting to know you, right? And what you're working on, and doing stuff like this. So I think that the community aspect of the Click is as important as the actual skills and experience that we gain by staying up with what's going on with AI.
And I think there's a real takeaway there as well, isn't there? So, I would advise anybody to join the Click, but if they didn't, I think still the idea of you build a community. So again, if you're worried about AI, you're trying to learn about AI, who can you talk to? There must be somebody that that is trying it as well, and you can compare notes. Google Notebook LM. I was late to the party. I only found out about it, I think, about 3 months ago, and it blew my mind. This tool that you can put sources into, and you can chat to those sources, make you a podcast or an infographic that you can just take away. For me, it was a game changer. And again, I hadn't heard of that for about 14 months after it launched. And yet I work in the AI space, and you say that you're talking to other people and they go, "Oh, have you tried this tool, or have you seen this thing?" Or I think there's so much value in that kind of human connection.
Well, one of the things that brings up in my brain is something I've been talking about lately, which is, when I told you when I came out, I was trained as a social studies teacher. So I studied a lot of history. And when people hear that, they say, "Oh yeah, well, what year did the, attack on Fort Sumter happen in this place?" And I'm like, well, just because I study history and I was a history major doesn't mean that I know every dang thing about history. In fact, I specialize in world history, and I still don't know nearly everything to know about that. And AI is the same way. Digital marketing is the same way, right? It's a massive category, right? So you kind of got to think about it in terms of, where do I want to settle in? Like so for most of us probably that are listening to this call, you just want to use it to do better work, maybe grow a business, launch business, and so on. So, I think it's important to figure out, like, where am I going to draw my scope in terms of, like, what am I going to pay attention to in the AI space? That's been a challenging thing for me because I am tremendously curious, so I can end up going wide. And it is part of my job, same as you, right? To sort of stay up on a lot of different things. But if I'm talking to somebody who you're really got your own company, or you work for a company, you're just looking for it to do work, I think it's 2026 is a good time to select a tool and learn it deeply and structure it properly. In other words, put things inside of it, as we talk about in the Click, like put things inside of it that turn it from new guy into, your veteran advisor and worker. And then only switch tools when there's a good business reason to do so. right? Like you see like, okay, this tool is clearly better and I'm willing to make the switch. There's a switching cost, right? Doesn't mean you shouldn't be tinkering around and sort of paying attention to other things. But I do see people sort of like hopping all the time. And I think that's a mistake because the AI gets better the more you train it and the more time you spend with it, it gets smarter. So, and that will continue to be the case. Eventually being a situation where it'll be like as big of a switching cost as switching cell phone providers, which is like, you know, not easy to do. I've been with the same cell phone provider for 20 years, John.
I'm glad you brought this topic up because it's one of the ones I had on my list to talk to you about, because there is so much noise, isn't there? You know, so many new tools coming out, and then this one does this and this one does this, and it's hard sometimes to ignore, and it's also overwhelming at times. You know, you think, well, hold on, are we using this tool? Would that tool be better? And I think the way you described it just there was great, which is keep an open eye, keep an open mind as to is something genuinely better than what you're using now. But at the same time, accept that you're using a tool and you've developed it and you've made it not the new guy. So, you know, have some patience. So one of the things that we like to do, Russ, is to take a listener question and discuss it. And of course, we're quite new, so we don't have a bank of these. But also, the question that we were discussing last episode is, I think, such a big question that I would really like to get your take on it. So the question that we had in was from Ben, and Ben asked, you know, how would you structure a complex prompt to work on a business plan? And my guest last episode, Dr. Dan Maggs, we discussed that, and Dan was saying, look, this is beyond a prompt. This is, you know, you need to build some context around this. And of course, a lot of that is exactly what you teach in the Click. But I'd love to get your take on, you know, how you would approach building a business plan with AI.
Let's go back to the new guy, veteran guy scenario. So if you were going to do business planning, which, you know, a lot of us have done in the past, like you get the some brains into a conference room and you get a whiteboard and you get some slides maybe, and you go about planning a business or making a Q1 plan or marketing plan or whatever it is. So why are we gathering people, and how do we choose the people that come in the room? Well, we're not going to bring the new guy in there unless we just want him to be a fly on the wall. Like, you just sit over there and absorb what's going on. So the first step is we don't want to be doing marketing planning using AI when we have a new guy AI. So we want to make sure that there's context persistently added into the AI. Those most fundamental, there are two documents that are most fundamental when you're doing that. And the first one is, what do you sell? So literally just a PDF document that describes your product or service in as much detail as you want, but even one sentence would be better than one sentence would be 100 times better than zero information about what you sell. Like even one clear sentence, I sell shoes. Think about that, right? So if you want to use a world-class intelligence, it's incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly capable, and you want to ask it to help you build a marketing plan, telling it that you sell shoes is versus giving it zero information is going to be quite the difference in outcome. But even then, a little bit more detail would be even better. Now, there is an upper limit to this. Typically, the documents that we build that describe what we sell are maybe a page long, maybe 2 pages of copy. It doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to be just format it in a way that is very clear, right? Using bullets and headings and stuff like that. Give the AI that document, like attach it to its brain by uploading it inside the thread would be the most basic way to do it. But then we talk about, you know, more advanced ways to do that. That's part of what I mean when I say structuring your AI properly so that it always knows what you sell. Like every time you turn it on, it's like, yeah, I know what you sell. The second document, so the first document's the offer. What do you sell? What's your product? What's your service? Just describe it. Maybe the pricing, maybe the guarantee, maybe some information about, you know, whatever you would want somebody to know before they did a business plan with you. The second document would be, who do you serve? What persona, or ICP, some people call it, ideal customer profile. And that can be one sentence if you want, right? We serve athletes. So one document says, I sell shoes. The second document says, we serve athletes. Feeding it those two bits of information, your marketing plan already just got 100 times better. But again, more depth about who you serve, and particularly, John, the pain, the challenges of that person. So if you feed the AI some information to make it so it's not the new guy, the first two pieces of information you want to give it is, what do you sell and who do you sell to? Then from there, it's still not a prompt. I mean, you could design a prompt to probably write a business plan, definitely today, in one shot. You could give it this big, long prompt, like, this is all the stuff I want in here. And it's just like a big, long description about what you want in this marketing plan. If it has enough context, it would probably do a pretty serviceable job of building you a marketing plan. But that's not typically how we work, right? Like, the way I work, I don't know about you, but like, a lot of times I just want to start a conversation with the AI, right? Like, I start with an AI that's not a new guy, right? The more context I've fed it in terms of like what we do, maybe I'm working with the veteran, the 5-year veteran or whatever. And I might just start with a conversation like, let's think about, what we're trying to do here. Like, I'm starting to build a marketing plan. You can even ask things like, what do you think the components of this marketing plan should be? That's a good way to start, is to work towards whether you have a structure in mind of your own or whether you want to have the AI help you build out that structure. A smart thing to do is to first create the sort of bones of what you're going to want, right? And then add the skin on later. So like, the way I would start out with this, if I had no, preconceived notion as to how I want this marketing plan to be set up or structured, would be to say, hey, we're working on a marketing plan. What do you think the components of that marketing plan should be? And let it sort of start out by listing out, well, a good marketing plan. And it'll take into account, if you structured it right, that you're selling this and you're serving this person, right? So it's going to take all of that context in mind and say, well, here's 15 components of the marketing plan that I think we need to put together. Now, my guess is you're going to need to remove some of those. So most of the output that you get from an AI, you're going to need to give it a haircut, right? Like, you're going to actually cut down, which is actually, I think, a good thing, right? Like, it give you too much. And you say, well, here's the 8 pieces that I want to make sure in our plan. And you feed it back into that. I think we need to do these 8 pieces. Let's start with this first piece. What do we need to be thinking about when it comes to this first piece? And so it's really more of a organic conversation in that way than building some big fancy prompt like we were led to believe in 2023, 2024. I think we're getting away from that now, I hope. But there's so many people out there that want you to think that they have some magic prompt, when in reality, it's just literally, it's not required. And a lot of times is counterproductive, to use some boilerplate marketing plan prompt or anything else.
So it's one of my frustrations when you see all these things where, oh, this is the ideal prompt for this thing or that thing. And as you know from my book, like, one of the main things is you have to start with human intent. And I just worry that if you're using somebody else's prompt, you can't get your human intent right. So, you need to, if you do want to use it, you need to have a look at it and you go, okay, well, what is it trying to achieve? And what am I trying to achieve? And what would I change? One of the things I really liked, well, 2 things I really liked that you said there. One was it's sort of like an iterative conversation. So, we're not trying to get this prompt that we'll do it in one shot. We're going to go into a dialogue, we're going to go into a conversation, and we're going to build that over some back and forth. The other thing I really liked that you said there was this idea of cutting back. I think there's a temptation when the AI gives you something to go, okay, this is what I need, and maybe tweak it. But actually, I think you call it giving it a haircut, is a great idea, because it's probably going to give you more than you need. And actually, sometimes less is more, maybe.
Yeah, and it does take it takes some experience working with it where you're just like, wait a minute, you know what? You're just giving me way too much. It's you got to understand, like this AI's probably read 150,000 marketing plans, or something, right? Like it's looked at and read through a gazillion marketing plans. It knows what it could or maybe would be included in a marketing plan. It knows what could or would be included in a marketing plan for a business that sells shoes to athletes. Like it knows that, and it's going to err on the side usually of being extremely thorough about everything that you could possibly include in there. And so, a lot of our role as humans in the loop here is, I love what you said there, which is to bring our intent, like what is it that we're trying to do, and using that AI as a thought partner. But we have to be the ones that ultimately decide, like, this component should remain. And honestly, most of the time, the AI, when I'm using it as a thought partner in this way, most of the time, or a lot of the time, I don't say most of the time, but a lot of the time, it just sparks a different direction for me. Like I read something, I say, well, yeah, that's good. Just like you would when you and I are talking, John. Like you probably feel that too, where it's just like I say something and it sparks something in your brain. And you say, "Oh, I really like how you said that, because let me just put on that." And then you come back to me, and I say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and we sort of plussing each other, right? Like, we're sort of like we're in some kind of a collaborative experience where what I'm saying is leading to new thoughts and ideas, or helping you to recall something that you could relate that back to from 10 years ago or whatever, right? And that's the same thing that happens with the AI. So don't just take everything that it puts out and just be like, well, that's what this has to be. Instead, it's just like, these are suggestions, just like working with anybody else in a collaborative manner. Ultimately, you're the boss. Let's put a fine point on the end of that. Ultimately, this is your AI, and you are the boss. And so some people, that scares them. They're like, oh, I just want it to do it for me. And sometimes you can just let the AI just be like, I have no idea how to approach this. I'm going to let the AI take a crack at this, and then I'll go from there. Right. And that's okay too.
Absolutely. I think that's key, isn't it? I mean, I say I always talk about human intent at the start, but it's a decision. It's not a straitjacket. It's a rhythm, and you can adapt the intensity, but I think it's got to be a choice. In other words, in your example, there you go. Look, do you know what? This time I'm prepared to let it run, and let's see what comes out. But I think for me, one of the key things is that at the end of the line, as you just said, you're the boss. So no matter how you start off, you might give it less input to start with, but the output, whatever you take out at the end, you've got to take responsibility for. Am I prepared to put my name to this and, be responsible for the output at the end?
That's right. Because at the end of the day, it's your company, or it's, you're the employee, or whatever it is you're doing, right? You're putting your name on these ideas or this output. So it should be yours, and you should own it.
And I guess that's something that's never going to change, no matter how smart the models become. They're not going to carry the can at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking about doing things like building a marketing plan, well, this is going to be your marketing plan. So make sure you stay extremely involved in that. I was wondering the other day, I wonder what your number would be. What percentage of words that get generated by AI never get read even one time? Which seemed like a funny question until I realized sometimes I don't read. I read a little bit of the output, and I'm like, no, that's not it. And I just scroll all the way past all this crap, right? And it's like, those words were never, ever, ever used or consumed because I didn't even read them. I bring that up because, we can get lazy and get into a habit of letting the AI run and skimming it and saying, yep, that's good. Let's move that on to the next step. And sometimes we have to slow down a little bit.
I think slowness is probably, there's quite a few things I'm going to take away from today. I love the new guy thing, curiosity, but slowing down. I think that is, with a tool that can be so quick, obviously it can take time as well, but with a tool that can generate things so quickly, taking time to see what it's generated is probably a real key piece of advice.
Yeah, and I think the big breakthroughs that we hope to see societally and big picture wise from AI are going to come from AIs that are working on things for not 10 seconds and to get the output, but for days, months, years. Set an AI on a difficult problem, and then let it go, and let it chew through as many possibilities as possible to try to find the right solution. So it's interesting to think about the difference between speed and sort of like compute power and time that could be used to put on a process. And we can apply that to how we work today. The most basic way is in ChatGPT. There's those two models. You can switch between ChatGPT 5.2. I don't know what it's called. It might just be called that. And that's your speed model. But there's one called thinking. And that thinking model is how you put more compute cycles on something. When you're doing things like a marketing plan, you want to be working in that thinking mode because it's going to put more cycles. It's going to take longer, usually only about 10 or 15 seconds longer. But when we want that extra thinking power, even you and I, like in our tools, we can select a thinking model and put more compute cycles on something. And I know the same thing, that the output is quite different when we allow the AI to think.
Absolutely. It's something I wrote a blog on recently because I think we've talked about this in the past. Before there was 5, we had 03 and 40, and most people didn't even know the selector was there, and most people just were in 40 the whole time, and we were jumping in and out of 03, probably being in 03 too much. And then we had auto, didn't we, come out in 5, where it was kind of been dipping in and dipping out. And I don't know what you feel about this, but I don't really like to leave it in auto. I like to try and take that decision myself. Auto does a fairly good job, but for me, I find sometimes it's doing the opposite one of what I might have wanted. I don't know if you find that at all.
Well, I sort of like to play around with photography. And so when you get a really, really nice camera, like even the most expensive camera, there's a setting on it called auto, right? Where it'll select the aperture and the shutter speed and all of that stuff for you, and the ISO and all that stuff, and just try to get it on auto mode and do the right thing for you. But no self-respecting photographer would ever use the auto mode on a camera. So when you get to be somebody that, again, that's learning more than just the surface level of using AI, I think you start to realize, I want control over whether I'm using a speed model or a thinking model, the same way a photographer would want control over the shutter speed or the aperture or something like that. So, your pictures are going to come out better when you're actually a pro and you know when to switch lenses or whatever. You want more control over your camera. And I think the same thing's true of AI. There's so many components of that, actually, not just switching models, but, so many of the things that we talk about in the click in terms of like getting underneath this and figuring out what are the different little settings and tips and tricks to get better photographs, if you will, out of your AI. The first and most primary one maybe is switching between a speed model and a thinking model. So start there. Start with getting out of the auto mode and saying, well, I want speed right now, so I'm going to use the speed model. And then when you get to something where you're like, I want this thing to think for a minute, put on the thinking model. That's a good sort of start towards, you're probably cutting yourself past 80% of business users that are using ChatGPT, who are probably all in auto mode, right? And don't, it just work. They just want to work. Just like you buy this really fancy camera, you just turn on the auto mode. You might as well just use your phone, to take the pictures.
True. So I could talk to you for hours, Russ, on this, but I think maybe that's a great place for us to stop in that. I love your analogy there. We've got in our hands, the top end camera with all the bells and whistles here. So, if we want to get the most out of it, maybe we've got to spend the time to understand how it works. So, I think maybe we take that as a takeaway, and I'd love to chat to you again in the future. In a year's time, let's see what's come out and what we're doing then. But thank you so much for your time today. We've had a really great chat, and hopefully speak to you again soon.
I really enjoyed it too, John. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Russ.